Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests. Bringing you the best paranormal shows and features. Playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same. Paranormal King Radio Network presents Paranormal King Radio with your host Ross Raposo each and every Wednesday as we search and dig for answers every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. with the best guests the world of the paranormal have to offer. Frightening stories, spirits and ghosts, dark magic, werewolves and vampires, serial killers, UFO and aliens, crypto monsters, haunted locations, demons. The paranormal will never be the same. Paranormal King Radio Network presents Paranormal King Radio with your host Ross Raposo each and every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we search and dig for the answers to the unexplained with the best and top experts the paranormal field has to offer. Each and every Wednesday night, the Paranormal King Radio Network presents Paranormal King Radio with Ross Raposo. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Paranormal King Radio. A very, very special guest this evening that most of you probably do know, and from being a best-selling author, Edwin Becker. He has appeared on Sci-Fi's Paranormal Witness in the record-breaking Season 2 finale, titled The Tenants. He has also acted as a guest host and co-host on numerous commercial and internet radio shows in the U.S., Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia. He was born in Chicago, Illinois. Coming from an abusive, broken home, he spent a number of elementary years in Maryville, a Catholic children's institution. There he learned Latin and became an altar boy. He went on to become a professional musician and spend his later teen years traveling the States with an R&B band. During his travels, he met and married his wife of 48 years, Entering college, he studied the emerging field of computers and eventually progressed to VP of MIS for a major healthcare corporation. He became president of a software company that catered to the sales and development of healthcare inventory management. Suffering a near fatal heart attack, he retired to the Ozarks, where he opened a collectible store for a number of years. Uh, he was he has been writing original stories for over 3 decades for pure enjoyment. He has 2 daughters that have given him 4 granddaughters. His youngest daughter is involved with fostering abused children and rescuing animals, including horses. He has a son-in-law involved in law enforcement. Uh, Edwin, thank you so much for taking the time and debuting here finally on Paranormal King Radio.
Ross, it's good to talk to you, my friend. I'm honored to be on the show. Thank you.
It's long overdue, and it's been too long, obviously, and it's just an honor to be with with such a best-selling author such as yourself. So thank you again for doing this, and your experience and everything else. You basically don't need an introduction, and anyone that claims that they've ever televised an exorcism and were the first to do so is full of malarkey. That's pretty obvious. You were the first to do so back in 1971, correct, Edwin?
Yeah, it was quite remarkable because, I mean, many of you may not be old enough, but in those years there were only 3 channels, NBC, CBS, and ABC, and PBS had just started, I think, in 1970, with limited viewing. And our news every evening was 1/2 hour. And if you took the commercials out of it, it was down to about 24 minutes. And they played they played the coverage of our exorcism. I think it lasted about 6.5 minutes. So a quarter of their news went to that, and they played it and replayed it, which worked against me in a way because there is footage that's on YouTube of the first televised exorcism or under true haunting. But since they played it so much in Illinois, they also made a 20-minute segment for their program First Tuesday, which was a 60 minutes type of program. And I never got to see that. We never got to see it. They wouldn't play it in Illinois because there was some type of FCC rules. So, yeah, and it was lost in the archives. So what you see on YouTube is what you get on that. But it was the first ever recorded, and a lot of people say it sort of gave license to paranormal becoming a public topic, because prior to that, paranormal was never a public topic.
Basically, I mean, yeah, and certainly not on TV.
No, it wasn't on TV, and I mean, my wife and I suffered the ridicule of that simply because there were no ghosts. There just weren't no ghosts in those days. You had all the ghosts were silly and comical, and Casper and Topper and the Ghost of Mrs. Muir, and we had no frightening images. I mean, if you read the book True Haunting, you'll see some of the things I did, and I was probably, I was ignorant as a young man. I certainly had no paranormal knowledge, but it's much like I tell investigators, you can be brave when something's invisible. So if you read the part where I'm tying the door and I'm mocking the spirit and he's vibrating the door, I could be real brave because I couldn't see what was actually moving that door. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
If I would have saw what it was, I might have went screaming out of the room like a little girl, But when and I tell investigators that don't be fooled when you go into these places that are severely haunted, simply because you can't see what it is. It's like shadow boxing or in martial arts doing a kata. You can strike and kick and everything at the air, and no one hits your back. these things can hit back. Fortunately, most of them don't. They'll allow you to know that they're there in a presence, but they 1 out of 10, I'd say less than 10% are malevolent. But if they are malevolent, they can't hurt you, and worse than that, they can decide to come home with you.
And Ed, on that Timbit video that you're referring to, do people just go to edbecker.com, basically edwinbecker.com to see that? Or where can people say that? Because that's pretty relevant, because you actually say that there's an apparition. People that look at it can see an apparition right on that short video, right?
Yeah, there's two things on that video that I never saw, because as I was telling you, it's God's truth. I've never watched that video from beginning to end. It brings back bad memories. I can smell the room. It's a bad memory for me. So it was a reader that watched it, and he told me, he said, at about a minute and a half, in the darkened doorway on the left-hand side, he said, you're going to see something start to come out and go back. And he said, was that like drapes or something? Well, I wrote him back, and I said, no, because that door was 10 feet from a wall, and it had no door on it. It had a vinyl sliding thing. So what you're seeing is sort of a white, you'd almost assume a woman with a robe or a dress is going to enter the room, and then she backs off. And you see it quite clearly. It's right there, and it's what made me really want to get the footage. When they did that, they had all intentions of putting it on their program First Tuesday, which ran against 60 Minutes, and they did. But they took 16 hours of film of our place at different hours and times of the day. I wanted all that footage, and when we did Paranormal Witness, they're owned by NBC, so they had access to the archives. And I told them, can I get all the footage? And they said, no problem. Except when they went to the archives, all of it was gone, every bit.
Wow.
So they had to come to me, and if you go on YouTube and you look up True Haunting or the first televised exorcism, that news clip is what they came after me for, because I had it, and that's what they used at the end of Paranormal Witness to show the reality clips. I had to rush it to them, actually, 2 weeks before the program aired.
Now, Edwin, it's pretty documented in your story and stuff. And when you wrote this book, did you ever imagine, because, people write a book and keep, as their own sort of diary and stuff like that. Did you ever imagine the response you would get for this story?
I've been floored and still am. I wrote it for family and to document what had happened, and it got passed around through the family over the years, and everybody liked it. Everybody, and it wasn't until the e-books and things became popular that my daughter said, Dad, why don't you publish that? And I didn't want to, but she, stayed on my case. My youngest is very persistent. So I whipped it into form, and I made a couple of mistakes that people won't see. I know because they're family. Like I talk about my favorite aunt, and I forgot that my aunts were going to be reading it, So that wasn't good. I didn't get everything out of it that I wanted, but I gave it to my daughter, and I told her to publish it under her name. So as told to Catherine Higdon, that's how it should have been published. And she doesn't listen to me, obviously, and she published it under my name. And this is funnier than hell, because I was mad as a hatter. I mean, I was just completely mad when I heard that it got released under my name. And then a friend of mine called me and said, "You're #1 in new releases on Amazon." And then I wasn't so mad anymore. It was like, you're kidding me, And the book dominated Amazon for about a year and a half, and it did that in the UK. The UK has been very good to me. and which that even amazed me more because that's the literary capital of the world. So for them to accept a self-published American author and put me at the top of their parapsychology, I mean, they've got great writers, and Gordon Smith and others that are. So it was a significant compliment to me. And now all of a sudden my book is taking off in France, and I don't know what that's about.
That is absolutely awesome. Now, Edwin, as far as when you're a best-selling author and when your name gets out there and you're well known in the paranormal field and just all over the world, really, you're going to develop a couple of haters that are going to bring up a certain amount of questions and oddities and quite stupid ones because obviously they're not reading the proper uh, English on it. And that was a bit of a case when it came to you selling that property, and literally, you've been telling people that you quite gave it away practically for nothing, and some people went above that and tried to say that then you took a loss. And can you clear that up a little bit, please?
Yeah, I'd love to because a lot of people don't understand. In the back of the book, I put a copy of what was called a quit claim deed. I call it a quick claim deed, but that's exactly what it is. And when my real estate man decided that he was excited about owning a haunted house and said, "I want it," I said, "I'll give it to you." But I didn't know anything. I was young, and I didn't know anything about the law. And he said there's such a thing as a quit claim deed. And what that does, and here's where the confusion is. A lot of people say, well, he gave it away for $10, but how did he pay off the mortgage? The quitclaim deed transfers everything. So what it is, a piece of paper, and once I sign it, he was supposed to give me $10 legal tender, which he did not, but I didn't care. Once I sign the property over, he inherits the property, any liabilities, anything I owe on it, which includes the mortgage. And he actually made money because he inherited my escrow account, which you pay every month for taxes and insurance, and that was about $400. So he got $400 in escrow. He took the mortgage over. He got the property and everything attached to the property, and I walk away scot clean. That's how the quitclaim deed worked. So I've had a couple people who I thought were knowledgeable and understood, and they said, well, how did you give it away for $10 and you still owed a mortgage? Once you sign a quitclaim deed, the recipient has now all the liabilities and assets. So I walked away, completely. We walked away clean, and I was happy to give it away. I mean, we could. That building was shown, I don't know, 100 times, and it had such a bad vibe to it that nobody wanted it. And I had worked while we lived there. I worked and cleaned it up quite good, but it just had a bad vibe to it.
So, Edwin, so eventually, I guess we could say that the exorcism, or basically the house blessing that was performed, didn't work whatsoever, did it?
No, and that's a great point, Ross. As a young person, I didn't know anything. I actually didn't know what an exorcism was. I didn't even know what an exorcist was. The psychic, and there's a book coming out on the life of Joseph D. Louise. I've written a foreword to it, and it'll be out by Mary Lou Anami. But Joseph D. Louise came to our house, spent time, studied it, examined it, and he felt that there was a presence on the first floor and basement that he did not want to deal with as a medium. He felt it was threatening, it was ominous, it was dark. He brought in the exorcist. That, I didn't recognize it at the time, and they were both very, very good people, and the exorcist was a professional exorcist. That's what he did. But the exorcist wound up doing not much because he needs something to exorcise, which I didn't know. I mean, a demon needs a host, You know, it has to have a person. It has to have a soul. It's not going to, regardless of what you hear, okay, there are no dancing dolls with demons in them and stuff like that. Demons don't inhabit inanimate objects. They can control them. They can throw them at you. They can do all kinds of things, but they won't inhabit them. And without that, The Exorcist was kind of out of place, which I didn't recognize. And then he was more uncomfortable because Joseph DeLuise wanted to connect with the spirits, and he did. He basically put himself in a trance. And I just wish there was more of the footage on YouTube, because he sat across from Joseph DeLuise, and the room got very, very tense. The whole ritual was about 3.5 hours long. When Joseph went into a trance, and he did communicate with an old woman, and there was an item that was, I guess she was bound there, but she wanted the safe deposit box key with a number on it, which I actually have. So we did find it. But The Exorcist was really frightened because he felt that when a psychic opens their mind, that they're vulnerable to possession. And he knew that there was something in that house that was pretty strong and pretty dark. So he was afraid Joseph was going to get possessed, and then it would have been a whole lot different exorcism on TV. So they were kind of mismatched, and it's the reason that I don't think you'll ever see a true exorcist and a psychic working together, because they're totally different philosophies.
And there was someone from the Manson, was it the Manson murders, Edwin?
Yeah, Joseph DeLuise helped locate Tex Watson, one of the Manson
He was also
followers.
involved in this as well, right?
I'm sorry?
He was also involved in this as well, right?
Tex Watson? No. That just gave Joseph, at the time, Joseph had national notoriety.
Yeah, that's what I meant, Joseph, yes.
Yeah, he had national notoriety. He had done a number of things, and if you read his book, when Mary Lou Anami's book comes out, I hope a lot of people buy it, because this man was kind of amazing. When I read his book, Psychic Mission, very few copies were sold. I don't think it went into a second printing, actually, but he made some predictions, and him and I became friends after we left Campbell Street. So him and I would go out and have a drink and talk. And I learned a lot about psychics and the randomness of, being a psychic. You can't dial it up like a radio. Whatever he felt would sometimes come to him very randomly. But in his book, he wrote, about sperm banks. Now, in 1970, okay, that was just an absurd thing. So when I read his book, him and I would go out and have a drink, and I'd say, Joe, what the hell are you thinking? Sperm banks? I couldn't even imagine that. And then he talked about hundreds of thousands of bankruptcies. Well, in 1970 and 71, for the whole nation, business and personal, you had maybe 25,000 bankruptcies. And he was talking about hundreds of thousands in his book. He saw so many things coming, and he described a vision where there's steel and flames raining down on New York. He basically described the Twin Towers.
Wow.
And he was an amazing man. He was a good man to know, and we kept in touch up until pretty close to the time he passed away in 2008.
Now, Edwin, about the activity that you and Marcia basically went through. So it's safe to say that Marcia got the worst of everything. And is it safe to say that you were more of the non-believer in the first, I guess, when you first started, and Marcia would, complain to you about some of the activity, and you did basically, a few of the things that, most of us are told not to do in this field.
I didn't know anything, and for one thing, there's something I know today that I portrayed myself, honestly and harshly a little bit as far as how I acted in those years. But now I'm finding out, through fan mails and emails and letters I get, it's the way a man functions. There is no man that resides within his domain, whether that domain is a house or a tent or a shack or a cardboard box, that doesn't believe that he can control it. Every man believes that they can control their domain. So, as a man and as a head of the household, you're not going to say that things are out of control. And I've got, a lot of emails to support that happens all over the world in all kinds of households where the head of the household, and yeah, I was a non-believer, and then I became, I'm a creature of logic, so I started to rationalize as much as I could. And then I got to the point to where I just said, I'm going to ignore it. It just didn't happen. And I put my wife through hell because I think it's all women. Women are more sensitive, and they're more sensitive and more caring about their nest, regardless of what that nest is. So if there's a disturbance, they're going to be quick to recognize it and to mention it. And then they face their husband, or as Marcia faced me, and I say, BS, that didn't happen. Why? Because maybe I didn't believe it. Maybe I don't want to admit it, that I can't control it. And yeah, I was pretty bad. I was certainly a non-believer. I had no references for ghosts. The church certainly doesn't teach you about ghosts. And I was a good Catholic, and they talk about other things, but when we had our house blessing, the priest ran the hell out of there.
Right.
It broke his holy water dispenser. He knew what he was up against. At that point, I did not. So I was kind of miffed that he didn't finish his blessing, and then he refused to come back, and then him and I was a hot-headed young man, so later on him and I had words, and he basically banned me from the church grounds.
And you actually turned your back on the church because of all that, right?
Yeah, and honestly, I still do. On the organization, I have not turned my back on God. I have not turned my back on my spirituality, but on the organization and the politics of the church, yes, I have, because the way they run it is within a parish. I couldn't go outside of my parish to get help because other priests won't enter a parish, because a parish is almost like a franchise. And then later in life, I wound up doing some contract programming work for the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I started to understand how wealthy they are, and I have a bad taste in my mouth about many organized religions.
No, so Edwin,
and charities.
So Edwin, were you provoking the spirits, or did you see certain things, or was it before you started seeing activity?
I provoked. I pretty much provoked the spirits, because there's one thing I tell people today as far as advice that I certainly didn't do. When someone writes me today and they say, I read your book, Mr. Becker, and they give me some kind words, but then they'll say, in our house, we can sometimes hear footsteps in the hallway. I'll return the email and I'll ask them, about the footsteps in the hallway. Does it frighten you? If they say no, then I tell them to let it be. Don't try to stop it. Because what you'll do is exactly what happened at Campbell Street, is that when you stop one thing, it'll create a different behavior. So if a ghost is opening a closet door, and I've got people that write me and they say, they close their closet door at night and they wake up in the morning and their closet door is open. I ask them, does it frighten you? If it doesn't frighten you, let it be. Because if you put a lock on that door or you bolt it in such a way, that ghost, that spirit's going to do something different.
Absolutely.
And you can't predict what it's going to be. Well, I did a lot of that. So, when I took the bathroom plug and I decided I'll replace it, it created more activity. When I moved the telephone, eventually I moved the telephone from the front room into the kitchen, it created more activity. I was doing everything wrong. And it was one of the first things the exorcist, the Reverend Davis, and Joseph sat with me, and they changed my behavior. They basically, because I had an attitude. My attitude was they should get the hell out of my house. And I was mad, and they said, no, you can't do it that way. They got me to treat them with more compassion, more understanding, to bring in blessed items, to pray, to ignore the things and not try to stop them from what they were doing, because some of the things were benign. I mean, when they opened up the kitchen cabinet door, it was baffling, but it wasn't harmful. And if I would have put a padlock on that door, then something else would have happened. And there's more ghostly activity out there than people can ever imagine. The problem is that people don't recognize it, and good for them. Because I get a lot of people who write me and they say, how do I get involved in paranormal? My advice is don't open that door. Because once you open the door to that awareness, you don't lose it. It's much like when Marcia and I saw the solid apparition of the old woman. It was as solid as looking at a person. I could study her. I could still remember her black wool coat, her gray hair, the sad look on her face. Well, once you've seen a solid apparition, to this very day, Ross, if I'm out driving on the highway and I see someone walking in an unpopulated area along the highway, I look at them, I look in my rearview mirror once, twice, 3 times. Are they still there? You always wonder when I'm looking at a crowd of people, if there's 100 people there, I wonder, is there really 100 or are there 98?
Right.
It changes your whole vision, your whole life. And if I had it to do again, no, I would not want to know much. I'd rather go see the movies and eat the popcorn, and you go home and that's it.
And I agree with that as far as, taking one element away, whether you put a lock on it or whatever, and it's going to, instead of the same pattern, it's just going to move to a different room or whatever it is. And in your case, actually, not to make it any enjoyable of a haunting, but the fact that, the first floor seemed more creepier, and the basement was definitely creepy in your story, and probably more haunted if it was possible.
Yeah, the basement was. I don't know why. Maybe in my youth I was an adrenaline junkie, but I would go down there and my fight mechanism would turn on. Yeah, my adrenaline would be rushing, and I did a lot of work. I had to clean the place out. I had to wash it all down. I had to bleach it and get rid of the coal smell. I had to paint it and make it livable. And so I spent a lot of time down there. But at all times, I felt I was being watched. And so much so that I'd turn around and snap my head, and trying to catch a glimpse of what the hell is it that's down here, because I could sense it. I just knew it was there. Yeah, no one else that ever lived there ever wanted to go in the basement. I mean, my wife never went in the basement, ever. She saw it when we looked at the house, and she said, I'm never going down there, and she never did.
And some of the other stories that happened on the first floor with the um, with the other tenants that you really didn't see or hear of ever again until actually Paranormal Witness started filming, right?
You're exactly correct. When we were scheduled to do Paranormal Witness, Dan White, who was our first floor tenant, contacted me. He had read the book and he contacted me, and his review is actually the first one on my True Haunting Amazon page, first one on the left. He's got almost as much fan mail as I did on that one. But he contacted me, and I invited him on the program. I called the producer. I said, "Can I have him on?" And they said, "Sure." So we had kind of a mini reunion in St. Louis 42 years later. Now, I went and met him thinking that him and his wife moved out and lived happily ever after. That's all I knew. I heard this horrific story. It broke up his marriage. They wound up separating. He told me he lost a dog as well, a dog that I never saw. It came and went so fast that I never knew it was there. He talked about the apparitions that he saw. He talked about being touched. He blew me away completely. I mean, he blew me away completely. And when I put the links together, I started to see a pattern where when we moved in, we had Crazy Myra on the first floor.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure whether she was possessed or insane. I'm still not to this day. Well, she came out, and then Danny and his wife moved in, and his wife became tormented and wound up ruining their marriage, and they left,
Wow.
which I never knew. Had I known that, I would have never let my sister move in.
Right.
But my sister kind of bullied her way in, her and her husband, and
that was a sad and tragic story in itself, right, Edwin?
Yeah, it's one I wish I could write, but I can't. She went down. She never recovered. She went down a dark road, and I got to experience firsthand the problem between the medical industry and the spiritual side, because doctors don't look toward the spiritual, and so my sister was diagnosed, medically with epilepsy, schizophrenia, bipolar, and you will not get a person who's been affected or possessed to go to church. It's going to have to be a forced situation, and that's actually against the law. It's one of the things that is a problem with all exorcists. So if there's any exorcist listening, you know what the problem is. Aside from determining if a person's mentally fit, because they might just be a mental case, or they might be on medication that alters their behavior, or they might be taking illegal drugs. You got to make all these eliminations, and then somehow you have to take that person and force them into an exorcism, and it is forced. Okay, there's no demon that is going to sit still while you try to exorcise them. So it's got to be an intervention. And, most interventions are actually, illegal. You take someone and tie them down against their will. It's the problem that exorcists have. I just did a webisode on edwinbecker.com on demons. And there's not going to be 10 real exorcisms in this country in the coming year because of that, because it's very difficult to perform an exorcism.
And until this day, Edwin, you believe that it wasn't a demon, right?
Yeah, I believe something had total control. I mean, in the end, my sister alienated herself from the whole family. She lived in such a way where she had to have the lights on and radio on or TV on 24 hours a day. She sort of disappeared, and she wound up dying, and she wound up in a hospital. Eventually, they moved her to a hospice. She died at the hospice. They had no trace of who she was or where her family was. She wound up at Cook County morgue, and she was there, I think, for 6 or 8 weeks. as a Jane Doe, but she had been arrested sometime in her life, so they fingerprinted her, and they were able to get her identity, and then through that they were able to eventually contact my niece. And
Very sad story indeed.
yeah, she got a
Now,
proper
Edwin, do you
burial.
think that April was she different before or after the Ouija board incident where you broke the board, basically?
Oh, she was significantly different. Once she started toying with it, uh, she was a very positive, she was very positive, ambitious, family oriented. She had two sons at that time, and she took care of her husband. She was incredible. And then she got involved with. There were a number of people. It was maybe it was a cult. I don't know. I never got to really know them. I didn't want to. But they started with the Ouija board and the seances, and her whole personality changed. And it's almost a formula. I think in one of my webisodes I talk about it, whether it's a demon or whether it's a malevolent attachment. A person stops caring about themselves. They start to lose interest. They start to pull away. They start to ruin their relationships. Their hygiene definitely suffers. So all of a sudden they're not washing their hair. They're not, they don't really care much about their appearance. And things just go negative, 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 negative. And that's exactly what happened.
Now, Edwin, in chat, the Worldwide Paranormal Society basically touches on if it's a demon, the power associated with the hatred, it would be a lot more violent. Do you agree with that?
As a rule of thumb, I'd probably say yes, but knowing, I've studied demonology, real demonology, so I meet a lot of demonologists that they don't know the name, they can't name 10 demons. There's a hierarchy to hell, and if you read about the demons, many demons have different types of personalities. I mean, some demons are gluttons. They're not going to do anything as long as no one interrupts their feeding. That's why you have some people that are, you wonder why a person can be overweight. That's just being human. We are creatures of excess, so, that second piece of pizza is always good. But when you get to the 1,000-pound range, now you're not being human anymore, okay? You're being dominated. There are demons for every single thing. So, there's violent demons. I mean, you can see that in serial killers, things like that. And you have, all the demon wants to do is to satisfy itself and take your soul to hell.
And basically, you did your research when you wrote Banished with the study of demonology, correct?
Yes, yeah. And
did you feel any occurrences while you wrote that book?
I had my second heart attack during that book.
Wow.
And that's when my pacemaker got put in, and I started to write, and this is God's truth, okay? I have a producer who is interested in Banished, but he'll definitely give me an offer if I write Banished 2, because he wants a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood is sequel crazy, okay? I started the sequel, and I got into chapter 2, and I stopped.
Wow.
And I just said I can't live in that world. It's such a negative world. If you study what demons can do, and everybody pictures the demons like in the movies, and it's just not correct. They can do that. They can do those things, but typically they don't. They don't. They grab you and they ruin you as a human being. And it's all in our face. When you turn the news on and you see a man who is known as being a good neighbor and a good friend to people, and all of a sudden one day he comes home from work, shoots his wife, kills his kids, and then shoots himself. It screams demon right there. That demon just, he just won the Full House pot because he took a whole bunch of souls. quicker a demon can take you to hell, the better they like it, but they have no time. You know, a demon does not have time, so it can ride you for 50 years. Uh, yeah, it's a bad subject. There won't be a there,
which basically goes back to what you were saying, where a demon wouldn't bother with a certain object. It's more after the soul of a person, but yet there are objects where it could be used to lure people and how to meet people, for example.
demons are smart. I mean, anyone who thinks that they can outsmart a demon, or these people who get demonology certificates off the web, are delusional. Okay, you're up against a creature that's thousands of years old. It can speak languages that sound like gibberish because they're dead languages. They know what you're thinking. They know all the embarrassing things you've done. They can just destroy you, okay? And they have a power. You know, yes, they can propel objects and they can hurt you. And they're not going to, they're not going to go easily into a situation where they're going to be removed or exorcised. And you don't want to mess with a demon. You know, when I hear people, investigators and things, when they talk about, I'm not sure whether it's demonic or malevolent. It's not demonic if you have to ask that question. You know, if you walk into a room and all of a sudden, if you walk into an empty hospital that was a deserted asylum and there's racks or beds or stuff there, if one comes flying at you, you know it's a demon. Okay. Other than that, because they don't have, unlike a spirit. A spirit will. I mean, on Campbell Street, I learned this. A spirit will build up emotional, but they'll rob your emotional energy. They'll create friction, and the more friction and emotional stress they can create, the stronger they get. A demon doesn't have to mess with any of that. They come out of the gate full force. So, if people who say that there's one fella that on Facebook, one of his posts was one night that he exorcised 3 people one evening. It's like, no, you didn't. A real exorcist, number one, they typically have 2 people. It's almost like a tag team. They're prepared to take days. They know that they're not going to exercise the person at 6:30 and go home.
Multiple visits, we may add.
Oh yeah. It'll continue for quite a long time, because they're riding this rail that's a tough one because they don't want to hurt the victim. And the demon has no regard for the victim. So they, at some point, if the demon starts to harm the host, then they have to quit and regroup and try again. And demons are a whole different thing. It's not something that you want to. I'm even sorry I studied it to do banished, because it's a door that you don't want opened. It's better left closed.
Right. You don't even want it haunting your mind whatsoever. So Edwin, basically you got True Haunting, 2 books. You got countless people that experience activity at the residence, and how many stories are not even told? I mean, this is really a lot bigger than you ever imagined, right?
For me, it certainly was. I guess every author writes a book and you hope that people are going to read it, and to give you an idea, this year 300,000 books will hit the market. And out of the 300,000, only 1% are going to have any measurable sales. So writing, to me, I was never writing for money. I've thrown away more novels than I've published. I've got a lot of them. I read them, and I get done with them, and I say, this junk, True Haunting came out of the blue. I never knew that people would be so attracted to the book, and I think it's because I was honest. I didn't try to scare the hell out. You won't find the words horrific or terrified in that book, because typically a haunting does not terrify you. It'll confuse you. It might frighten you, but it's not going to terrify you. If you're terrified, the book, it's going to be a short book. Anybody who's terrified, because you're going to go into some place, you're going to get terrified, and you're going to leave, and you're not going to go back. Your flight or fight mechanism is going to go off, and your flight is not going to quit. You're not going back to be terrified again. So whenever I read a story where someone was terrified and then they went home and went to bed in the same house, it's like, that's a bunch of BS, you know. Or if you're horrified.
And Edwin, as we got about just under the 10-minute mark now, some of the other books that you've also written is The Death Walker. I presume that's nonfiction as well?
No, Death Walker is a vampire series that I'm currently working on book 3.
Okay.
It'll be a trilogy. It's kind of campy, but I do believe in vampires. So, you know, I don't believe in the Hollywood vampires, but I believe that there are blood drinkers.
Right.
And you know, and there's certain facts that go along with that you don't have to drink everybody's blood 100% to kill them. They don't have to be exsanguinated. 25% blood loss, and you go into hypovolemic shock, and you die. And, you know, anybody who says they don't believe in certain things then can explain to me why 1 million people disappeared last year, and the FBI believes they can possibly only locate maybe a half, because some people change their identities intentionally to escape alimony or whatever. But 500,000 people disappeared in the United States that'll never be seen again. Where did they go?
Right. And also you got 13 Chilling Tales?
Yeah, 13 Chilling Tales is kind of just a group of short stories with a 14th story that's absolutely true. My favorite book, one of my favorites, is Death List, because it is my logical solution to child abuse and pedophilia. You know, I've never understood.
Does that get graphic, Edwin?
I'm sorry?
Does that get graphic?
No, not in that way.
Okay.
Not in that way. I could never do that. But if you've dealt with abused children, or if you've been an abused child, and you see what our legal system is doing, where they basically go through a revolving door, and our protection is that they tell you where they live if they register. You know, so my book Death List is a solution that, you know, maybe it already has come to pass. So the basis of the story has already been enacted by, you know, fortunately they didn't credit my book.
And what about Famished?
Famished was written actually for sci-fi, but it's based on it is based on reality. I'd call it novelized nonfiction, because Famished deals with the fact that methamphetamine and these concoctions they're making can turn people into cannibals. Now, since I wrote the book, a lot of people say, well, you're very prophetic, because now they got people eating people's faces, and they don't advertise cannibalism in America, you know, widely. You know, so you had in Maryland, they had a cannibalistic situation where a college kid started munching his roommate. In Boston, they had a man who was eating his wife. I think everybody saw the clip. It's on YouTube, where the guy was eating the guy's face in Miami. And recently they had another case in Florida where a guy was eating 2 people.
And
methamphetamine can affect a part of the brain called the hypothalamus, and once it's damaged, it's damaged. So, you know, if you can imagine, my son-in-law is a police officer, and one of the things that they hate to run into is a meth addict situation, because it takes 2, 3, 4 cops to bring them down. Even a small woman, it'll take 2, 3 people to handle her. Well, imagine someone with that strength and ability, and they're impervious to pain, becoming a cannibal. That's the book Famished.
And
Sci-fi asked for something that was bloodier than The Walking Dead, and I gave it to him. So I don't know if it'll ever happen or not.
Trip Back in Time.
That's just pure nostalgia. It's a feel good book. It's a little bit biographical, but it's a wish. As a grandfather, I really am afraid of this world for my children, my grandchildren, and I wish I could take them back to a time when I was young, 1956. And that's what this story is about: time travel, where grandfather.
When the parks were full, basically, unlike today.
Yeah, when you could walk up, I'd walk around the city of Chicago as an 8, 10-year-old boy, and no one would bother me. I could go into a bakery and I could say, "Miss, can I have a donut? Can I have a cookie?" And they'd give me a cookie, for free. I'd walk out. I'd go to the park and there'd be a bunch of guys I don't know, and I'd say, "Hey, fellas, can I play?" "Yeah, come on. Can you hit?" "Yeah, okay."
Absolutely.
And there was a time when, your parents kicked you out of the house and they said, "Come home when the streetlights come on."
Yes.
And they didn't worry about you. And Cokes were a nickel, and candy was a penny, and a hot dog and fries was a quarter or 20 cents, and it was an innocent time. Pornography was unheard of for the most part. You didn't have to worry about anything on television. I mean, there were high standards.
And Banished, we touched on a bit. I guess we're not going to see a second book on that one, Edwin?
No, no. I'm not going to finish it. I've got 2 chapters. I'm not going to finish it. I'm tossing it. I've tossed away quite a few novels. A writer in true fashion. I mean, that's one of the reasons a lot of people ask me why I price my Kindle books so low. They're $2.99.
That's awesome.
My other authors that I know are pricing theirs at $9.99 and stuff like that. I just kind of feel, and I don't mean to put anybody down. As a writer, I want to be read. So as far as I'm concerned, I give away a lot of books. I want to be read, and I just love to write. So I write, and sometimes I'll finish a book, and I'll just judge it as being not as good as I thought it was, and I dump it.
So we can't say that there won't be a True Haunting 3, right? Because you never know who will reappear, for example.
I don't think there'll ever be a True Haunting 3 because, to me, the only person that I'd ever want to talk to that would make it book worthy would be the real estate man who took the building from me. Because he faced just a horrendous stream of bad luck. Wow. I mean, from his wife leaving to illnesses to his business going bankrupt. And I'd want to know how much he attributed. It's much like when I met Dan. I asked Dan, I said, what, when he told me about his marital problems and things, I said, what do you attribute to Campbell Street? And he said, it ruined my life. And I think that's how the real estate man the story he would tell would be pretty horrendous.
So Edwin, besides edwinbecker.com, you got some pages on Facebook as well you want to get out there? And I know you got your YouTube web series, True Haunting, as well, right?
Yeah, well, if you come to my edwinbecker.com, there's a tab where it says more, and there's what I call webisodes. And I've got about 9 webisodes where I talk about, just no BS, my life experience and my opinions of certain things and my experiences. I don't theorize, and I don't like people where they do, where they give you advice based on having no experience. I can only relate to what I've experienced, and that I'm not saying I'm not narrow-minded from that standpoint because paranormal is paranormal. There are things that are going to happen that can't be explained. And it'll always be that way until we start to collect information and start to quantify it and study it, which we're not doing. Right now we're just having fun investigating and collecting EVPs.
And so, any other pages you want to get out there, Edwin?
No, if people write me, if they, I'm easy to find on Facebook.
And that's a new book you're working on as well, right? With all the fans that you've met over the years and all over the world and stuff, and collecting stories, right?
Yeah, it's going to take me a long, long time because I'm quantifying everything that everybody ever wrote me, and I'm learning a lot. I mean, 99% of the people don't want their identities given out. They want it because they're afraid of ridicule, which is, absolutely common. I'm finding out that women are more sensitive than men, and men, aren't quick to admit that things are out of control and they're up against something like that. And I'm finding out that certain ghostly activity is rather common. Regardless of where in the world you are, ghosts like to do certain things. And so certain activities are like, boy, ghosts like to walk the halls in America and in UK and Australia and Philippines. Ghosts like to open closet doors. There's certain things that are just incredible that they do that are just almost like standard behavior. So I'm quantifying all of that, and there'll be a chapter on each type of activity with examples from all over the world.
That's awesome. Edwin, we're basically out of time now. So the best way to get a hold of you is by just going to your website, edwinbecker.com, and getting your books there as well.
Yeah, and of course they're on Amazon.com, True Haunting, and I'm on Facebook, and I take great pride. I'll answer all emails, good, bad, or otherwise. So, if someone writes me and says, that book sucks, I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you.
Well, Edwin, this is, it's just been an hour just flew right by. I mean, it's been amazing talking with you. We certainly have to do this again. There's just so much we can touch on as well that didn't give us enough time. We certainly want to do that again. And, you're just a wealth of information. We got to continue to pick your brain when we can. So, I'd love to have you back, sir.
Ross, it's been my pleasure. And to everybody listening, God bless you all, And don't open that door if you don't have to. Okay, don't open that door.
Great advice from a great man. Thank you, Edwin.
You have a good evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Edwin Becker. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening tonight. Donald, Dave, Denise, the tour guide at the Sally House. Check that out if you're in the area. Roy from Ireland and his the Worldwide Paranormal Society. Tony, Angel, Rhonda, Squirrel, the number one listener, and Rhodey from Houston, Texas, who's got her own paranormal team. Pasadena, I can't remember the name at the moment, but she's a regular on Paranormal King radio network. And so you have to check out her group as well. I want to thank you all for tuning in. We'll do this again next week. Just remember the new time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. And we don't have a guest as of yet to announce, but we will certainly get one. So make sure you tune in. Until then, stay safe. Have a great week. And God bless everybody. Paranormal King Radio. Each and every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for listening. Each and every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, the best the paranormal world has to offer. We're going to get some answers each and every week. You check in here, I guarantee you that. We will get closer and put this puzzle together, and we are going to find out the paranormal answers to the world's biggest mysteries. Paranormal King Radio Network and Paranormal King Radio. each and every week, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll catch you again. Thanks for tuning in. We are going to get some answers right here next week. So tune in here, right here on the Paranormal King Radio Network.